this project is making a wooden mallet, which is basically just a big wooden hammer. And you might wonder what a wooden hammer is used for. Well, you can use it on the back end of a chisel. And if you take the Dragon Scale workshop later in the fall, hopefully when we get it going again, wooden hammer is used to knock down the points on the Dragon Scale twist to keep them from hurting your hand. And it's a lot better than a steel hammer, because when this is hot, a steel hammer would mar the surface. For this project, you're going to need some wood. I used a couple of different pieces. First piece I have is a piece of 5/4 by 6 just straight pine board. 5/4 by 6 is actually 1 1/8 inches thick and 5.5 inches wide, and is outrageously priced for a piece of pine board. I also used a 1 by 6 piece of oak, which turns out to be 3/4 inch thick and is the same 5.5 inches wide. And it makes a big hammer and a little hammer. There is a pattern that goes with this. It's a PDF. You download it, print it on a couple of pages, cut out these pieces, and then tape them down onto your wood, mark around them or cut around them. I used a chop saw and a band saw, or a power miter box and a band saw. For the angle cuts, I think it'd probably be better to continue to use the chop saw there. I think you get a little bit better, straighter finish, which makes for a little easier assembly on the project. And for the curve, of course, you're going to need some sort of a band saw or a saw that you can use to cut corners with, so a hand jigsaw or a saber saw or something along that line. I'm going to cut the long boards into more manageable pieces before I go to the bandsaw. Now that I've cut out all the pieces and did a little sanding on the sides just to smooth them up a little bit, I've marked the waist on each piece. This is the narrow part where the handle meets the hammer, and this is the tendon that goes into the actual hammer head. I'm going to round over these edges right up to the line, but not past. Okay, I've got my 1/8 inch roundover bit in my router, bearing on the ends that rides on the surface that keeps the bit from cutting too deep, and I've adjusted the depth of the router so the edge of the curve is just flush with the surface of the router and will be flush with the surface of the wood. Let's give it a shot. Worked out pretty well. Now for the other side. That still makes for a pretty hefty handle. I may want to thin this down a little bit, but I think I'm going to go ahead and put together the rest of the mallet and try it a couple times before I make it too thin. As I hope you can see, router bit cut just a little bit deep on the top surface. But that's okay. I'll fix that with just a little bit of sanding. And while I was at it, I went ahead and rounded off the top of each of these handles just to save me a little bit of sanding later. Time to glue up the pieces. I took a close look to make sure I didn't have any sawdust or fuzzies or anything sticking out on either side. So now we're going to try and glue these puppies up. Going to want a pretty good coat of glue. I want this mallet to stay together. got some wax paper down. It should help protect the surface I'm gluing on. Place that one there. And now we're going to use the handle as a guide for fitting. Make sure we've got these guys all together nice and tight. We're not going to glue the handle in just yet. We're going to do our best to get everything nice and aligned. Take the handle out. Glue the handle in when we glue the other side. When we glue on the other side, I guess I should say. Slide this over, see if I can get a clamp on here without disturbing any of the alignment I've got. Want to clamp it snug, but not too tight. If you get it too tight, you're going to push all the glue out of the joint, and then basically you'll starve the joint for glue. So there we go. Pretty snug. One more test fit. Yeah. And this is why we test fit, because all of a sudden, too tight. Too loose. There we go. Now to let this dry. So here's the glue up from yesterday. Two pieces are nicely fitted together. The glue is all dry. As you can see, they don't all fit perfectly. We'll need to do a little bit of sanding to bring this into perfect alignment. And to do that, we're going to clamp these guys together and then spend a little bit of quality time with a belt sander. So I'm going to try and get them as close to matching up as I can. Looks pretty good. I'm using 36 grit paper, about as coarse as asphalt. Definitely will take the skin right off of you, so you've got to be careful. And we're going to sand on the both ends and the curve, then we'll swap over and catch the bottom part. Okay, we're going to try and catch the flat side real quick. Use this clamp just as a temporary fixture to hold everything together. Blow the dust off the lens. I'd managed to sand one of the ends a little bit out of square, so this all looks good. It's ready for the next glue up. Before I do that, I'm going to hit it with some finer paper to smooth out the roughness just a little bit. So this piece was sanded as a unit, so all the edges match up nicely. I want to be sure that I get the right pieces back together, and once I get the handle in here, then we'll glue everything together. Be very careful to make sure we get all four corners matched very carefully. So let's do some gluing. Got in there nice and tight. And the fit's not perfect. We'll get a little glue in there to help fill the gap. Now the difficult part, getting this piece perfectly positioned and stuck down without the glue all slipping it sideways. Your fingers are a great tool right now for feeling those minute little differences. And pressing it helps to make the glue stick and make it a little less slippery or slidey. Okay, let's try and get a clamp on this puppy. This is usually where everything starts to slide and come apart. Make sure I'm not catching the wax paper on the bottom. Okay, I think I got one side. See if we can pick up this other side real quick. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's already moved a little bit. sometimes needs a little adjustment. Be a good place to have a mallet, wouldn't it? Going to add a couple more clamps just to increase the squeeze, and look how much that slid just putting that clamp on. A lot of times if you're making something with a glue up, you can put a couple of nails or screws in it to hold it while you're clamping the glue so that it stays where you'd like for it to stay. But in this case, I want to have a nice clean face on the outside part of the hammer, so I didn't want to put any nails or screws or anything that would show. Now we're just going to clamp the living daylights out of this. Hold it together nice and tight until the glue sets. Okay. Well, we finished the final glue up, and with a little bit of sanding, hammer is ready. As I commented before, the handle feels a little thick, but you certainly get a good grip on it. And boy, this turned out to make a pretty good sized hammer. You feel a little bit like Thor holding the hammer of power Molinar when you got this guy in your hand. Should whack pretty good. Shouldn't be a problem. The glue should hold it all together, and of course the taper in the handle in here is going to keep the head from flying off the handle, so that should be pretty good for what we needed to do when we're working in the shop. The 3/4 oak made a smaller version, a little easier to hold, not quite as heavy. Probably good for some smaller things around the shop. Probably really good for whacking on the back end of a chisel when you've got some heavy chiseling to do. So that's the project. I hope you make one yourself, and I hope you enjoy it.